It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy. Back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews Shipper. I took my first pass of the Commander in front of us on a budget on my quest out brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing. That's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. So I'd really appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll do all that YouTube stuff for me, and I'd really appreciate it. But today, we're continuing through Final Fantasy content, and we're talking about Kuja, Genome, Sorcerer. Our 4-mana Rakdos 3/4 human mutant wizards. At the beginning of our end step, we're going to make a tapped 0/1 black wizard creature token with whenever we cast a non-creature spell, deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then, if we have 4 more wizards, we get to flip Kuja over into Trance Kuja. It says if a wizard we control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. I think Kuja is really interesting. It gets to make these 0/1 wizards get to damage our opponent. And when it flips to the backside, right, it's 2 instead of 1, which is pretty cool. If you think about it, I mean, with 3 of those wizard tokens, if you have no other wizards out, I mean, you're dealing 6 damage each cast of spell, which can go a long way, right? But we're going to play wizards, and we have a lot of fun wizards that can do really fun things. There's also other spells in the set that make these 0/1 wizard tokens, so we hopefully can generate a few of them. We have ways to up that damage to make it really relevant to our opponents as we're casting our spells. And then we have ways to pay off spells because we're going to be trying to cast spells with these wizards out, so why not pay it off for us? I want to say a quick thank you to the channel member. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all our videos just a teeny bit early, check that out down below. All right, well, what do we have as far as wizards go? And there's a lot of interesting options. We have the new Black Waltz #3, dealing 2 damage to each opponent whenever we cast a non-creature spell. This is important because this is that gutter snipe style ability, but it's on a wizard, so Kuja is going to get the privilege of that there. Corsication Mage from Bloomburrow is a wizard, and we can get the copy of it with Offspring. Deals 1 damage to each opponent whenever we cast a non-creature spell, so we're starting to see some redundancy of that ability. Dreadhorde Arcanist is interesting. Whenever it attacked, we can cast an instant or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to its power from our graveyard without paying its mana cost, and then exile it once it resolves. This is a really interesting ability, getting some of those spells back during combat, right? And hopefully just driving more damage through to our opponents. Fandaniel, whenever we cast instant or sorcery, we get to surveil 1 in the beginning of our end step. Each opponent either has to sacrifice a non-token creature or lose 2 life for each instant sorcerer in our graveyard. I mean, most time it's just going to lead to our opponent sacking a creature, but I think it's still just going to be useful to threaten that damage over the course of the game, right, as we get more spells into our graveyard. Gleeful Arsonist has Undying, so it can come back if it dies. But it says whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, it deals damage equal to its power to that player, so it can actually start dealing some damage to our opponents when they cast their things. Gogo says at the beginning of combat on our turn, we can have Gogo become a copy of another target creature we control on the turn, except its name is Gogo, and if we do, Gogo and that creature each get +2/+1 haste. I think this is really interesting for Kuja because if you copy Kuja, you could get 2 wizards on end step. I don't believe Gogo would flip, but I believe it wouldn't try to flip because there's nothing on the backside. But it could be a way to get an extra one there. You could also just have this become a copy of another key wizard you have. Maybe you have become a copy of something like Black Waltz, and then you play those, spells, second main, right? There's so many ways to take advantage of this copy at the right time. Harmonic Prodigy is going to have all the abilities of other wizards go off at additional time, and shamans, because we do have a few shamans in the deck, things like Gutter Snipe, right? But we care most about the wizards. I thought Krark would be a ton of fun. So whenever you cast instant or sorcery, you flip a coin. If you lose the flip, you return it back to your hand, but if you win the flip, you get to copy it. I thought this is interesting because whether you win or lose this flip, you're still going to get all your cast triggers from our wizards. But if we win the flip, we just get an extra copy of that spell. And the fun part is we lose the flip, we actually get to cast the spell again, right? And potentially get more triggers, right, from the same spell. So Krark's kind of funny, and I think it might just lead to a ton of fun, right, for us casting these spells and getting these triggers. Mysidian Elder comes in and gets us another one of those wizard tokens, right, giving us more opportunity for that damage. Queen Brani is not a wizard, but whenever she attacks, we make one of those wizards. So I think it's still worth it to play her. I mean, it has prowess, so we're going to be able to hopefully grow it over the course of the turn as we cast spells, and then get one of those wizards each turn. So we do have somewhat recurable ways to get these. It's not like Kuja is the only way we're going to get these 0/1 wizards. Rioni has a really interesting ability. At the start of our combat, we make X tokens that are a copy of another target creature we control, where X is 1 plus the number of instant sorceries we've cast this turn. They get haste, and you exile in the beginning of the next end step. What I think is interesting about Rioni, there's a lot of ways you can look at this, but what I think is really interesting is you could go to combat. You could cast a spell before combat. Maybe you have a couple wizards out that tokens, maybe you don't. Make 2 copies of one of those wizard tokens, and then main 2 play more spells, right, and just get more damage. There's ways that we can use Rioni to think about what makes sense at the right time to do that. You could also, if we had a way to shut off legendary, right, really take advantage of taking copies of some other things. Roaming Throne is just going to help everything overall, doubling all triggered abilities of the wizards that we choose when it comes in. It's going to double so many things in our deck and become so beneficial for us to pick wizard and see all of our wizards' abilities get better. Esper Ramon, when it comes in, deals some damage to a creature and then has 2 turns of just buffing up our wizards, which is going to be useful, especially as we go wider. Circle of Power and Cornered by Black Mages each are going to help us make these wizard tokens that deal this damage. Circle of Power also adds lifelink to all of our wizards for the turn, which is important because those tokens deal damage to each opponent, meaning that Circle of Power will actually gain you some life from those damage those tokens are dealing that turn, right, as they're dealing their damage to each opponent. Transpose and other ways to get a token, draw, pitch one, and lose a life. And then you get a token. You can rebounds, meaning it casts again. You won't get the wizard off the rebound, but you still get another draw discard, which I think is worth it. Black Mage's Raj turns a creature into that ability, which I think is really interesting. There's a lot of ways you can look at it. You could put it on Kuja and just have another copy of that ability. You could put it on a random creature again and get another copy of that wizard, damage ability. I think there's a lot of ways to look at Black Mage's Rod, but I think it's a great piece for us. Even if you just leave it on the hero that it creates, because the hero becomes a wizard. And then Lindblom, the Adventureland, makes one of these wizards on its adventure side and then just comes in as a land, which is pretty useful. Again, finding as many of these wizards that deal damage when we cast spells as we can. But we can also have damage, remember. Remember that the damage that our wizards are dealing is non-combat damage. So we have things like O'Hare Axonal and Solfim that can help us out. O'Hare Axonal says whenever a red source we control would deal any amount of non-combat damage less than its power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to its to O'Hare Axonal's power instead. Yes, most of the wizards that we're making are black tokens. But remember that Black Mage's Rod does not change the color of the thing you attach it to, right? Corsication Mage is red. Black Waltz number 3 is red. Not only that, but we do have things like Gutter Snipe and some of those other ones that are shamans in the deck that deal damage. So O'Hare Axonal may not be across the board as good as if it said anything, but I think it's still worth playing. But Solfim takes out the red completely. It just says if a source we control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent they control, it does double that damage instead. So it's hopefully going to always be 2 or more, right? If Kuja is flipped over. So here we're trying to just affect that amount of damage every time it goes off. And then Artist Talent, if we can get it up to level 3, adds that many damage plus 2 every time we would deal non-combat damage to an opponent. So going from 1 to 3. So again, the goal here is just to try to edit the amount of damage as they get triggered every time. But again, we're casting spells, so we want to care about casting spells. You have things like Chandra's Hope Beacon, which is going to copy the first instant or sorcery we cast each turn. She has abilities to add you some mana or exile some cards and play some spells. Professor Onyx is going to kind of add to the fun, and that every time we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, each opponent loses 2 and we gain 2. I mean, this is so good, right? Over the course of a couple turns, right? Hopefully just getting out our opponents. The +1 lets you look at some cards and get something into your hand. The -3 is going to help. The -3 and the -8 just hopefully help us hurt our opponents in the process. But I think mainly Onyx is there for her static ability. That is a Magecraft ability, right? And then just getting cards into our hand. Judith, again, is a shaman, which remember that Harmonic Prodigy cares about shamans and wizards. So I thought Judith would make a ton of sense. Mainly, I think to make those imps, whenever the creature dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent is kind of cool, because then opponents have to think about whether or not they want to kill them and take the damage, and Judith should be able to make them pretty easily. Judith is at 5 mana, so it's a little bit up the curve, but I still feel like Judith is well worth it for making those imps and becoming more threats. Mystic's Mastery and Will of the Jeskai are a way to start digging spells back out of our graveyard to cast them again. Mystic's Mastery for 8 mana can just cast every instant sorcery from our graveyard for free, leading to a huge turn with all those Wizards tokens. Will of the Jeskai lets us give all of our spells in our graveyard flashback, but can also have us redraw some cards if we control our commander as well. And then, of course, I love Arcane Bombardment. I've talked plenty of times on the channel about my love for Arcane Bombardment. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery each turn, you exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard at random, and then you copy each card exiled with Bombardment, and you can cast any number of them without paying their mana cost. So basically, every turn you're going to get another spell, hopefully, that you get to cast for free. 1 the first turn, 2 the second turn, 3 the third turn, and you can start to see where you're now getting all of those, hopefully those Wizards triggers, right, as you're casting these spells and just building way up towards some absolute mayhem, hopefully. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again, no deck's ever complete. This is my first pass at Kuja, and I think going into testing, the question is, are there other Wizards that we'd like to look of? I love the look of Gark Confidant. I just couldn't find a spot for it. I wanted to focus more on this spell slinging damage idea. But Confidant's nice because it allows you to start getting more access to cards, right? Getting your upkeep, you get to put that top card of your library in your hand. You lose life, which is mana value, but you help dig a little bit more. A Basalt Ravager looks interesting. Whenever it comes in, it deals X to any target where X is the number of creatures you control that share a creature type in common. It could dome somebody for the number of wizards you have. I don't think it's the best choice of a wizard, but it just shows you that there are more wizards you have if you want to. Past in Flames, very similar to Will of the Jeskai. Except it doesn't let you have that option to refill your hand. It just gives all your sorceries and instants in your graveyard flashback. I think this is a key ability as the game goes later to kind of recast all these spells from your graveyard. But I think you have to kind of think. The other thing I would think about going into testing is do we have too many expensive spells? Like, do we think about lowering the CMC of all of our spells or the mana value of all of our spells, so we can just shotgun more of them and then shotgun more of them when we use these Past in Flames abilities? Like, I think that's one of those things that we can consider going into testing. Are our ideas translating enough, or do we need to think about what spells we have in our deck for them, right? Let's do what we love to do most on the channel and get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtest on our channel is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not to just show off all our best plays, but it's to get in some gameplay scenarios and kind of understand what hands are we keeping and how we're going to build our board state. Here we got a 3-lander with the Talismans. That's 4 mana. That's enough for Kuja. And our non-cards here are Rionia. So we talked about Rionia before being a nice way to potentially copy those wizards for the turn. Mysidian Elder, which can come in and get us one of those wizards. And then Jeska's Will. Jeska's Will lets us add a red for each card in target opponent's hand, or exile the top 3 cards and play them this turn. And if we control Kuja, we can do both. So a very interesting set of cards here. I mean, either way, we have enough mana for Kuja, which I think is the important part. A little bit awkward here that this Tainted Peak isn't going to get us black for a little bit. But we have a way to, get some down in the Shadowblood Ridge and the Talisman of Progress, or the Indulgence there, sorry. So now we're at 4 mana. I mean, Kuja could just make sense. Get it down, get the wizard this turn. We're nowhere near it flipping, but at least then we can start the process. Man, Krark seems like a ton of fun. But I don't know that I want to completely flip. Because if I play Krark, then Kuja's flipping this turn, right? If I play Rionia, Kuja's flipping this turn. I'm just trying to think of what can I play that's not going to flip Kuja, but give me a bunch of value. I can play Gutter Snipe. It's not a wizard. It's a shaman. I kind of want one more turn of getting a token before I flip Kuja, because I want that last wizard token, right? So my thought is Gutter Snipe. I can leave up Rakdos Charm. Rakdos Charm is one of those cards we need to be really careful about, especially when Kuja flips over. So Rakdos Charm is traditionally used to stop things like token decks, because it says each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. I remember with Kuja on the backside, our wizards will deal double damage to us. So we do need to be a little bit careful with our Rakdos Charm. But my thought is the Gutter Snipe, again, take the wizard token, and we'll come into our next turn. Now you can start to see, Oraxnal is really good with things like Gutter Snipe, right? Because it helps the damage out there. Now I think I think it might even be worth going for something like Jeska's Will, see what people have access to. If somebody's still got 6 or 7 cards in their hand, we could go Rionia plus Mysidian or Rionia plus Krark, right? Just to get a bunch of things down. We can even exile the top 3 if we want to, try to hit a land, see if we can get some more value onto the board. My thought is I'm paying 3 for that. If somebody has 7, I'm kind of thinking just like Rionia plus the Mysidian. The Mysidian gets me another wizard. Rionia would make me 2 copies of a wizard this turn, which isn't as ideal, but it'd be more, be better right next turn. But the reason that's my thought is then I get another wizard token here. So we would have got 2 damage, 4 damage off total from casting the Jessica's Will. Of course, the wizards aren't going to attack, but now, right, Kuja would make us that 4th wizard and flip over. Now, if we had done, because we couldn't have like done Rionia and then waited till after combat to play the Elder or another spell, because Rionia goes off at the start of combat, right? But now I don't mind this because we've got the wizards. I mean, now it's just a question of can someone board wipe us? If they can, I mean, I think we love this option. You go for something like Rakdos Charm, just destroy somebody's artifact or remove somebody's graveyard. And now 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 damage, right, to everybody on each spell cast, and I think we're just in great shape. You could even, I mean, hope we top a spell here, which we did. Blasphemous Act kind of sucks, but at the same time, it doesn't. You could play Krark, you could play the Rakdos Charm, again, picking, let's say, destroy target artifact, 10 damage, right, and then Rionia now is going to make 2 copies of the wizard, right, with its ability. Go to main 2, and now if we cast the Blasphemous Act, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 damage, right? So that's, 24 damage in a turn, depending on how things look. Krark, may flip, and we might win or lose the flip, depending. But, I mean, the point now is that's so much damage in a turn that you can just, right, hurt your opponents with. And, Blasphemous Act would wipe the board, but maybe it was enough still to end out, that. Either way, we just if not, we just let the wizards go, right? And maybe we look to, I just realized that their Rakdos Charm might even go off, right? Krark could have returned it to our hand, and then maybe you just play it again, right? So there's options there on that one. I think that's good enough for playtest number 1. We kind of got to see that proof of concept. Here on playtest number 2, we're getting a lot more black. We've got 3 of them, and we've got the Lindblum, which we can play tap, but we also have the way to get that wizard. So we do effectively have 4 mana. We just kind of might want to play that wizard. Overkill for some removal. Go for that copy, and then Rionia. So lots of interesting things. Play Swamp. There's the Jessica's Will, which actually could end up being really interesting for us to net us a ton of mana. So here, right, there's a world where you play the Jessica's Will, and if somebody has 7 cards in hand, you could Lindblum plus Go if you wanted to. You can't Lindblum plus Kuja because we net no black mana with the Jessica's Will. But if somebody has it, I mean, this might seem worth it to me because you just go into Kuja next turn and then you get to flip Kuja over. You'd have 2 wizards if you want to do it that way. I think I still want to Lindblum either way to get the wizard, so that's why my thought for the Jessica's Will would make the most sense. This makes the wizard and goes into the adventure, and then we can play it next turn, right, as our land for turn, or we can do it on a future turn. Go becomes a copy of the wizard, so now the wizard could attack this turn, right, if we want to. And then, I mean, I guess now my thought's Kuja, right? We would get the wizard at the end of turn, and it would flip over. So again, it kind of stinks that we can't make another wizard that way, but I think the important part is now Go can become a copy of that wizard every turn, so that does affect the number of them that we would have. Man, City on Fire is really interesting. We could technically play it right now, and it would really help all that damage, right? Whenever we cast non-creature spell, they would be dealing 3 instead of, they'd be dealing 6 instead of 1, which is a huge deal. So we could even go through combat, let Go become a copy of the wizards, and then tap all 3 and convoke them for City on Fire. They're all going to deal 1 each, or 2 each, right, because of Kuja's backside. But now City on Fire would be down, and then now our opponents are in real trouble, right, if they don't have any way to get rid of the wizards or the City on Fire. I mean, we just are going to have a great time right? You go through combat, let go, become a copy of the wizard. Start with something like Mind Stone, 6, 12, 18 damage here, and then follow up with the overkill for, I would imagine, lethal on everybody at this point if we've already dealt damage with the wizards before. Or, I say I can't do Rionia and I can't do Mind Skill and Rionia. I'd have to do it in overkill. But again, I think you see my point of like, this is one of those things where if your opponent just doesn't have the roll at the right time, I mean, this could be, lethal to our opponents if they can't get rid of Kuya's backside. Now, if they get rid of Kuya's backside, this is still 3 damage apiece. I mean, 9, 18 damage is probably still worth it. And then you just, play Kuya the next turn back down and flip them back over again, right? So there's still options there, but I think it just goes to show you what maybe one of our upsides could look like with the right lack of removal for our opponents. But let's go one more playtest. Here we see a 3-lander with that Harmonic Prodigy. We see Stormkiln Artist, who's a shaman, but again, makes us treasure when we cast spells. Can be very useful to add us some extra mana. There's the remove, and then there's O'Hare Accidental. So, nothing here that the O'Hare Accidental is going to really help us with the damage, and I'm starting to see where maybe O'Hare Accidental might be worth taking out for something else, but I think this is why it's important to test cards sometimes, and learn these lessons for ourselves. All we're missing is 1 mana for Kuya. I don't mind this hand at all. Prodigy will double up Kuya's ability, meaning hopefully we could get a couple wizards out of it. But turn 1, we draw the Haunted Bridge, so that's great. Now we're up at 4 mana. Turn 2, I think we'll get the Prodigy in. Turn 3, of course, I can't cast Kuya, can't go next turn, and there's really nothing else I could do. So I think we just got to pass it up. Now we pay the swamp. If I pay Kuya, 1 trigger is going to go off, and then the second trigger is going to go off, and that would flip Kuya. So the question is, does that make the more sense, or does it make sense to put something else down? I think that makes the most sense. Again, so you get the wizard, and then you get the wizard, and he flips over, right? So now we're talking about, right, 2 damage apiece because of the Prodigy, or I'm sorry, 4 damage apiece right now because of the Prodigy every time we cast a spell, which is a big deal. So we do have the Terminate, which could set that off, or we could do something like the Remove to down. We could get the Shaman in to start netting some mana, right? There's a couple options we have here. I don't think because the wizard's Trance's ability is not a triggered, so right, Prodigy's not going to do it. I kind of don't mind the Storm because this will double the Storm as well, and then you just wait till the next turn maybe where we can get some more mana. Because now my thought is now we can play the Terminate, deal the damage, and then we make 2 treasures, right? And then maybe it's worth playing something like the Remove then. Right, and kind of maybe leading up to an extra turn. We're now in one of those awkward ones where, although we're dealing some nice damage with the Terminate, we really haven't seen much card draw to really bail us out. But I think I don't mind it. Because then we come back to this turn. This can give the buff. Accidental, I mean, it seems fine, but I'm really feeling the lack of card draw, right, this time around, really hurting us. We have more than enough mana that we know what to do with, but I think that might be the only problem sometimes about flipping Kuya over is I wish we had a good way to flip it back, which we do, I guess, in some senses, but I feel like Kuya is also going to be a nice target for removal, so maybe somebody's removed Kuya already, and we get to just replay it and get another token out of it, right? I think if anything after the 3 playtests, maybe it's worth looking into things like the red-based draw spells that make you treasures, just so that you get draw, you get card draw, you get triggers. Because going and looking at the deck, I am playing things like Faithless Suiting. I thought about, big score, unexpected windfalls. Maybe you put the Siege, the Spoils. There's, Night's Whisper, Sign and Blood. Maybe we need more of these draw spells just to guarantee. I have the Deadly Dispute, but you could even think about something like Corrupted Conviction or Village Rites, right? To just, again, get more spell cast for creatures that are already sitting around. So maybe it was just our playtest. We didn't see the card drop. I'd love to know what you think of Kuya and I. We'll catch you on the next one.